Hello, welcome everyone. Today I'm joined by Chandrasekhar Acharya Das, aka Cyril Wohrer. Chandra, how are you today?
I'm good, thank you. Greetings from Mayapur.
It's great to have you.
It's my honor to be with you.
Oh, thanks. You were the second devotee of Krishna that I ever met, and we met in Mayapur. I don't know if you remember that. That was a while ago.
Yeah, kind of a yes-no answer. I don't really remember perfectly.
That's okay. So today we're going to talk about preaching ancient wisdom in the modern era. So before we begin, can you just tell us a bit about when you started preaching?
Basically, the moment I came in contact with Krishna Consciousness, this was like September 1994. No, September 1993, actually. Yeah, I remember somehow or other, I guess by Krishna's arrangement, the first book I ever received, except for the one that I got at LAX, which I never read, but which gave me the access to the ISKCON addresses, and through which I contacted the Paris temple because I was living in Paris at the time through a college, a year abroad from Cornell University. So aside from that little book, which I never really read, the first book I ever got on Krishna Consciousness was this book that was published by the BBT, the North European BBT, a red, big old fat book called The Nectar of Book Distribution. And it had all these quotes from Prabhupada's purports, verses from Kaviraj Goswami, direct verses from the Chaitanya Charitamrita, tons of excerpts from Prabhupada's letters, dating from 66 to 77, testimonies by different preachers or about the importance of outreach, about the importance of sharing Krishna consciousness with others. So before I even began reading the Bhagavad Gita, I was reading all these more, I guess, insider, commentaries, purports, thoughts, realizations, verses about the importance of spreading Krishna consciousness. So I would say, like, from the very before I even got to know the ABCs of the Bhagavad Gita, I understood that we have to distribute the Bhagavad Gita.
Wow, that's really interesting. So you were instantly attracted to preaching even before you fully knew what Krishna consciousness was.
Yeah, but it wasn't my fault in the sense I didn't really search for it. Like, I remember I went to the Paris temple, and I think the second time I went there, I met this, at the time, a monk, a brahmachari, who was from Croatia. And because my mom was from Croatia, we hit it on, and he was really nice to me. I was just like totally brand new, 20-year-old, not knowing anything. And he said, "Here, I have a gift for you." And he just gave me this book, and so I have to thank him, I guess.
Sounds great. So I'd like to start in general, get some good definitions going, and then eventually we can get into some more detailed techniques, methodologies, etc. So first of all, I'm curious what you think is the difference between preaching and teaching.
The difference between preaching and teaching. The difference between teaching and preaching. Avoiding sort of stereotypes and stuff like that. I would perhaps venture to say that teaching has more of a component of respecting the other and hearing him or her and sharing one's knowledge, whereas preaching has perhaps a little bit more of a, I don't want to say it in a condescending or a bad way, but perhaps a little bit more of an aggressive, like, here's the truth, you got to take it, mode. What do you think?
Well, I'm thinking the main difference to me is that a teacher has a student, meaning the student has already agreed to some kind of relationship, whereas the preacher, and this is what I think you're referring to with the aggressive part, the preacher kind of invades, or it's a strong word, but the preacher is kind of entering into someone else's world and trying to bring them into their own world.
Right.
Yeah.
Teaching, there's already been a sort of a contract that's signed. like the other person's willing and you know, wanting or willing to hear you.
Yes, yes. And so, at least by that definition, I consider myself to be a great teacher and a terrible preacher. That's my own experience.
It's interesting. You're touching on a point of free will here, and to what degree does God respect the free will of others, and to what degree does he slightly perhaps bend the rules? Like, for example, I mean, since I brought up this topic of book distribution, you know, when I was a monk, I did that for 5-6 years, just passed out thousands and thousands of Bhagavad Gitas. And we often, you know, meditated on the idea of Paramatma, of, you know, the super soul. So when you're approaching someone, you're trying to tell them about Krishna, and they have no idea, you know, what to speak of wanting to be taught. It's like out of the blue, you're approaching them and giving them a Bhagavad Gita or something, and we often meditated on the idea that, you know, Paramatma, the super soul, is within that person's heart, and the super soul or God reciprocates with the preacher or with the teacher's desire, and therefore from within, while respecting the free will of the person, may slightly nudge that jiva, that soul, and kind of say, okay, come on, take the book from him, or just listen to him or her for a few minutes, you know, that sort of nudging. So because we believe that God wants all souls to go back to him, right? So therefore, I think God has sort of you know, he has what's it called, a conflict of interest. On the one side, he wants to respect all souls. On the other side, he wants them to go back to him. So maybe there's like a slight breaking of the laws, so to speak, for the ultimate good of the souls, in which he kind of is not completely 100%, you know, respectful of their free will, and out of just kindness kind of nudges them. I think that's maybe what Krishna did with Prabhupada, for example. You know, we believe his desire was so intense to spread Krishna consciousness in the West that perhaps Krishna in the heart of all his followers, you know, kind of nudged them a little strong from within, like, right, to come to Krishna.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean by this kind of nudge that's happening there. And yeah, it seems like there's always a dance going on, right? It's never just like, okay, we have complete free will and that's it, and there's complete destiny and that's it either. There's always a dance between many different personalities, really. We like to keep it personal, right?
Right.
One more definitional thing I think is important, and I'm curious what you think. What's the difference between wisdom and knowledge?
I think knowledge can be theoretical, whereas when we speak of wisdom, what's implied often is realized knowledge.
And realized knowledge means it's like become part of our character, would you say?
Yeah, it's no longer theoretical. For the person who has the experience of it, or who believes he or she has the experience, it's no longer theoretical. Like the person is speaking from an experiential dimension.
Yes, I agree. So,
like I remember one time, Bhakti Bringa Govinda Swami, a sannyasi disciple of Prabhupada, he once told me that he met Prabhupada, or he saw Prabhupada. He went to a lecture, and Prabhupada during the lecture said, "Please believe me when I tell you that you are not your body." And he says, you know, I'd heard that many times, because he had become a devotee months or if not years before meeting Prabhupada or seeing Prabhupada face to face. So he had read that statement so many times. It's the foundation of the Bhagavad Gita, right? We're not our bodies. But he says, when I heard Prabhupada directly say it, it was thunderous. So we could say that, you know, Prabhupada was speaking from a place of realization, whereas many of us believe that we're not our bodies, using that same example, but may not have realized it much yet. Hello? I can't hear you anymore. You're, oh, hello?
Hello?
Yeah.
Okay, we're back. It's okay. I heard everything you said. Now I forgot what I was going to say. It's just a great example. So for me, it was really easy actually to conceptualize that we are not the body and we're the eternal soul, but to fully live that knowledge, that realized knowledge, moment to moment, day to day, year by year, there's like a small little, really, I think, say they've attained that level of wisdom. Okay, another thing I'm curious about, and this could be why I am so bad at preaching myself. I think that I basically think ancient everything is good and modern everything is bad. So it's a strong position, but that's basically where I'm coming from, where I only want to talk about ancient knowledge, ancient wisdom with people.
At least you're not saying everything Western is bad and everything Indian is good.
Yeah, I'm not at that place, I guess. So yeah, what are your thoughts on the ancient versus modern situation?
I think there's some good things. I think the principle that like for example, the principle of yukta vairagya that Rupa Goswami codified in his two famous verses, those two verses, the one that talks about false renunciation and the one that he names yukta vairagya, correct or proper renunciation, which is incidentally, Prabhupada wanted to be printed in really large size at the entrance of the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust warehouse in wherever it was, in Los Angeles or New York. So for example, that principle I think goes beyond ancient or modern. The principle is eternal. It's beyond time. The principle of using anything material in the service, in the preaching mission of God. That principle is not ancient or modern, and it applies, I think, just as much, 500 years ago, or at the turn of the century, or whatever, as it does now, or as it will in 200 years. So, I prefer to look at the principles. Is the principle eternal? Does the principle apply past and present? And if it does, then perhaps that's what is good to focus on.
Yes, I'm the same way. I think that's why I like the ancient stuff more, because it's more timeless. So when I think about modern science, modern philosophy, modern anything really, there's it seems a tiny percentage which is actually timeless and eternal, something we could call timeless wisdom. I really can't think of anything though. When I think of the modern world, the good things, I think of technology and this kind of global culture we have now, where people from all over the world are connecting on the internet. I think that's ultimately a good thing that we should preserve.
And also sort of, you notice there's a move towards, it's almost like there's a move, speaking in that general global culture that you're talking about, a move maybe, far away from spirituality, but a move towards a sort of a more, what Krishna describes in the Bhagavad Gita as a vision or a paradigm in the mode of goodness, where you see some commonality in everybody, regardless of their color of skin. For example, now with this George Floyd issue, people all over the world are just like up in arms against racism. You didn't see that 200, 300, 100 years ago. People are up in arms against speciesism, against abuse towards animals. You didn't see that, 100 years ago, 200 years ago. People are up in arms against abuse of women. So it seems like in some strange way, and perhaps, Lord Chaitanya, Krishna, God is orchestrating this kind of behind the scenes, or maybe it's just the effect of just, the budding Sankirtan sacrifice that's being performed more and more all over the world. People are kind of coming more and more towards a place where they really value the equality of all beings, some sort of metaphysical equality.
Yes. I remember talking about something similar to that with H.D. Goswami, and it seems to me that, yeah, there's a good intention behind it, like, but if it's just equality on a superficial level, you're missing the whole point.
Right.
There's actually nothing there, and
right.
the only way it works is if you bring in the soul. Then you can talk about real equality and real justice in that sense.
I agree.
There's one example I thought of from The Matrix. I wonder if you think this is an accurate example of a preacher being Morpheus and a teacher being the Oracle. Do you think that's fair?
You know what? I forgot the difference between Morpheus and the Oracle. Or Morpheus is that African-American guy with the black glasses who tells him, like,
yeah,
to take this pill or that pill. But I forgot who the Oracle is.
The Oracle is the elderly lady, and she only talks to the people who've already been saved by Morpheus, basically, and she gives them advice on what to do.
And she's the teacher.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I think both are kind of interchangeable functions,
I hope so.
Yeah, it must be. I mean, the example again. I mean, we like to look at Prabhupada. Prabhupada went and did kirtan in the streets, late into his movement. In other words, not just at the beginning, but 77. Give lectures to anybody. We have examples of disciples of Prabhupada who, even though they're like maybe initiating gurus, or they have a dedicated flock of whether diksha or not diksha, just of students that they teach, they still like to meet random people who have no knowledge of who they are, and they like to give them some prasadam, or to give them the holy name or mantra card or a Bhagavad Gita, in that sense acting as Morpheus. So I think those two roles, those two hats are, I think it's healthy for a teacher / preacher. You see, I put them in one term, the teacher / preacher to remain humble and real. And a good example, I think, is Indradyumna Swami. For me, like, I've had a lot of association with him, and in one sense, he's got that sort of mini acharya hat. He's got thousands of initiated disciples, and he takes responsibility for them, and gives them knowledge and teaches them. But at the same time, it's almost like he almost prefers to talk to some drunkard teenager at Woodstock, or and tell him about Krishna. So I think both are important.
Sounds good. So I think now we can go more into detail. So especially, I hope you can teach me how to preach, or at least preach better. I really do think I'm a terrible preacher, because even so, if we take preaching out of the context of Krishna consciousness and religion in general, it's kind of like marketing, right? Not the same thing, but it's similar. And so when I was a kid, just trying to get my friends to play the same video game as me was difficult. It didn't matter how excited I was, how really excellent the thing was. I've just been struggling my whole life trying to get others around me to kind of play the same games that I play.
Well, remember what comes to mind now is this famous statement by Kaviraj Goswami in the Chaitanya Charitamrita: Krishna Shakti Vinana Hetar Pravartana. One can spread the Sankirtan movement only when one is empowered by God or by Krishna. So, we may feel adequate or inadequate in our capacity, but our scriptures say, our acharyas, echoing scripture, remind us that the empowerment comes from above. It's not really our own ability. Again, Prabhupada comes to mind in his famous prayers on the Jaladuta when he arrives in Boston Harbor, and you read his statements where he's like, I have no ability. How the heck am I going to convince these people about your message? I have no clue. I'm powerless. but I know that you are the greatest mystic. So if you desire their deliverance, if you make my power of speaking suitable for their understanding, only then will they, connect. Only then will they understand your message.
So, Chandra, when you look back at all the thousands of books you've distributed and all the other preaching you've done, you've also made some really excellent music, which to me, that counts as preaching for sure, and good service. So when you look back at, your career, so to speak, what are the things that stick out as really effective, something that just worked really well? An attitude or a sentence that you might say, something like that?
Oh, specifics about when you're talking to someone? It really depends on the context. Where are you speaking to? In what context? Or are you talking more in terms of principle or habit or lifestyle? Or
I actually mean in specific. Something you might say to a person you're talking to on the street, or it could be an attitude. I don't know.
With time, I've developed more of a sense of being careful about distinguishing between, again, like theory and personal experience. And there's something kind of annoying and a real turnoff for me, and so I assume it's the same for others who hear me. When you hear somebody, speaking beyond his or her realization, like repeating something from the Bhagavad Gita, for example, and just saying, this is it, instead of having the humility to say, well, I believe this is it. And I think that makes a big, big difference, because when you're speaking about your personal experience or your personal faith, like, I really believe that Krishna is the supreme person. What can people say? Like, okay, hey, I don't agree with you, but I can't take your experience or your belief away from you. So you're not speaking beyond. In other words, you're speaking from a place of humility and honesty. Whereas I see a lot of times you have sort of more immature, overzealous, young, communicators of Krishna consciousness who, with all best intentions, are just kind of saying it's because this is it or this is that. And it's like, okay, but like, why don't you just say, I believe? Why don't you just qualify it? Because you clearly haven't, or there's very small chances you've really realized it, So at least for me, with time, I've kind of become more and more sensitive to qualify my statements with terms like, it's my belief, I believe that, I have faith that X, Y, Z.
That makes total sense, and it definitely brings into mind, I think, where I struggle. Definitely lack of humility, but also as a philosopher, as a student of reality, I really don't like beliefs. I really want absolute truth that's like universal and everything. So I think that's why people get turned off sometimes when I talk, because I'm very strong and I use absolute terms and this and that. But
you're speaking from a place of logic and rationality, and that's also very cool, because you're not speaking about your realization. If you're speaking very logically, okay, if we accept that this and this and this and that, then this must be the logical conclusion. There, it's that similar type of humility that that comes from, let's say, look, this is just my belief. It's in the same category, I would say, to say, well, look, according to all reason, this must be the case, if this and this and that. No?
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm very inexperienced here with the preaching thing, but it's an incredible. I mean, like in Krishna consciousness, preaching is not. It's way different than many other religions. Like I'm thinking of like Buddhism. Well, preaching, like distributing books, is not just increasing our numbers and maybe people will join us. It's the act in itself is a very high service. It is itself a ritual, a ceremony, a religious rite, so to speak, right?
Okay. Well, other traditions value that activity in the same way, don't they?
Yes, to the same degree. I'm not so sure. I know it's similar with Christians, missionaries, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But the where the example I thought of which where it really doesn't match is Buddhism. I can you even think of a Buddhist preacher? It's just like a weird idea, right?
Yeah. Especially if you have a sort of a not even to speak of non-dual, if you have a this non-existent reality as your conclusion. At the same time, paradoxically, you see all sorts of Buddhist preaching coming to the West since since the 1950s. Thich Nhat Hanh is huge, for example, that the Vietnamese Buddhists who came to America and France. Matteo Ricci, this French Buddhist teacher in America. There's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of Buddhist organizations. So they're definitely preaching too, quote unquote.
Yes. So when you or when anyone starts preaching to someone else, especially from a different culture or from different worldview, there's going to be resistance, right?
Yeah.
Maybe so let's just say in general, someone's just resistant. Maybe they think, "Oh, I don't know how I feel about this. This makes me feel a little uncomfortable." How do you typically deal with resistance?
I believe in having studied the history of religious conversion academically, both on the undergrad and on the graduate level. I'm convinced beyond a doubt that the more cultural differences in terms of what we would call externals, food, recipes, architecture, dress style, musical instrumentation, the way one does a religious service, and so on. The more there's differences on that level between, let's say, two groups who have two different worldviews when it comes to spirituality, and one group or one member of one group is trying to convince a member or some members of the second group to awaken to, we would say, or from an objective third-party view, to adopt the spirituality of the first group. The more cultural differences there are, the harder it is for people of group B to convert, quote unquote, to the spirituality or the religion of the people of group A. I'm convinced of that, having seen it in history, having seen how for centuries and centuries, for however long we have, recorded, we have annals, historical data of religious groups, in their efforts to preach, to expand in other cultures, or in contexts that are other than the context from which they sprang from. That seems to be always the same. That same strategy, same principle is always there. Whether you look at, I took a course at UC Santa Barbara, at the University of California, Santa Barbara, that really opened my eyes to this. It was taught by a white Orthodox Greek Christian guy who did a course on the history of preaching in the Catholic Church. And whether you look at the first preachers who go to China, actually, what's his name? Martin Scorsese did a great movie on that. I don't know if you saw it. Whether it's the first.
I saw a review about it. I didn't get to see the movie yet.
I mean, since you spent a lot of time in China, I think you'd find it quite entertaining.
Oh yeah, I really want to see it. Forget the name though.
Yeah, me too. And so whether the first missionaries to Mexico, the principle is always to build, cultural, linguistic bridges with the people you're trying to preach, while transmitting the nugget inside, which is the message that, the theological message and the practice you're trying to distribute. You often hear feedback from or letters that missionaries in different countries write back, and they're like, and there's this problem of the sort of the double conversion that they unconsciously try to impose upon the people they're trying to preach to. There's first the conversion to the external culture of the preacher, and then the conversion to the theological belief and spiritual practice that the preacher's trying to give. And the first one is really non-essential. The first one actually blocks a lot of people from accessing the essence that the preacher's trying to communicate, And I think we've seen that in the history of the Hare Krishna movement.
Yes, that principle to me seems fairly obvious. So the next question is, what do we do with it? How do we proceed? I want to share with you this. I shared this story in my first ever podcast interview, actually. I thought it was so fascinating. This is also about China. Maybe you studied Matteo Ricci a little bit?
Yeah, one of the first preachers to China, right?
Yes, this is 1500s, 1600s or so. And so just like in how you were talking, so Ricci he became a Chinese scholar. He learned, he first adapted into the Chinese culture, learning the language, their own cultural,
He dressed like a Taoist monk, right?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. He had all the same clothes as them, and he became revered very quickly. And he was even, talking with the emperor, and quickly China was about to become a Christian empire. And it was actually ruined by the Pope and by the later Jesuit preachers who were insisting that the Chinese should stop their own cultural, what's the word I'm looking for? Cultural rituals, I guess, about ancestor worship. But anyway, all that external cultural stuff that China's been doing for thousands of years, they said, no, you have to stop doing that. Even though you love Christ and you're really receptive to Christianity, even though that's true, you need to stop doing your Chinese stuff and start doing our Roman Western stuff. And it was so insulting that the emperor said in one letter, you people are banned. We will never be Christian, and you have to get out of here. And it's just the most poignant example I know of in history where it points to the principle.
Continent,
right? Yeah, it would have completely changed history in ways we can't imagine.
Yeah.
If they were just cool. And they said, hey, you love Christ, we love Christ too. You want to be Chinese with how you're Christian? We can be Western with how we're Christian. That's great. So, yeah, that brings us to
Can you hear me?
The future.
Hello?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Hello?
Oh, okay. Yeah, sorry, there was a delay there. Let me just add something to your really nice observation. In America, for example, you have, like just in Los Angeles, for example, you see billboards on the freeway for, a Korean Christian church, right? It's a Korean Christian church. The letters are in English and in Korean script, and everybody there and everybody in the world understands that this is a Christian church. Granted, but it's a Korean Christian church. In other words, the language is going to be Korean, the external culture is going to be Korean, the food's going to be Korean, the local pastor's probably going to be a descendant of some Koreans if he didn't immigrate, recently, or maybe he was born from Korean parents in America. And that's so, in other words, they own their Koreanness, so to speak, while being Christians. And yeah, to kind of lead into, I interrupted you, I'm sorry, you were going to talk about the future. I think a strategy for the future for us who are part of the, the global Hare Krishna movement, I think we had better own our own local culture as Vaishnavas, as opposed to making abstraction of it. In other words, a devotee, let's say a Sicilian devotee, I think, has better tell the world, yeah, I'm a Sicilian Gaudiya Vaishnava. I'm a Vaishnava, I'm a quote unquote Hindu, specifically Vaishnava, specifically Gaudiya Vaishnava, and I'm a Sicilian Gaudiya Vaishnava, and I offer mozzarella and basil leaves and fresh tomatoes, to Radha and Krishna. And I do it with bhakti, and please bless me that I can do it better. But I'm going to stick to my basil and tomatoes and mozzarella, And the devotee from Bali, has no qualms in saying, yeah, I'm a Gaudiya Vaishnava, but I'm a Balinese Gaudiya Vaishnava. And therefore, I'm going to dress like, we've dressed with these sort of like half skirts, kind of, colorful dresses for the last millennia. But I'm a Vaishnava.
Yes,
own it.
Yes.
I remember when I was speaking of Indra Swami, when I was on the Polish tour, I was part of a band, and there was a devotee, a drummer, a Black African American drummer who was amazing. His name is Sri Shyam, actually born in the movement, the Hare Krishna movement. Took initiation from Hridaya Nanamarj when he was like 14 or something, went to the Vrindavan Gurukul. And I mean, the guy was such an amazing drummer. He won a national drumming competition by playing Mridanga. The dude was just like, and he's actually one of the editors of Bass magazine. Amazingly gifted. And I remember, I'm half French, half American, or both. And I remember once he said, Chandra, you're French also, man. Own it. And that struck me. I was like, holy cow, yeah. Instead of trying to, no, I'm only American. No, I'm also French. I'm going to own it, right? It's an external designation, granted, but we're engaging it in Krishna service. So in a similar way, I think devotees sometimes have a tendency to one thing is to completely identify with your body and everything related to your body. That's obviously an illusion. We're not our bodies, and therefore we're not American, we're not Sicilian, we're not, Peruvian, we're not Australian or Korean. We're not our bodies. We believe that. But coming back to this idea of Rupa Goswami and engaging everything in Krishna service, we're not impersonalists. The impersonalists, make a clear-cut distinction. What is it? Jagat Mithya, Brahma Satyam Jagat Mithya. Spirit is real and matter is illusion. But we, as devotees, we don't have that same sort of relationship with matter. We say it's temporary, but it comes from a real person, namely Krishna. And so in that sense, it has substance, eternal substance, even though it's, it comes and goes and it's temporary, but it's not completely illusory. If we call it illusory or false, we say that only because it's temporary. But its source, namely God or personal God, is not false. It's not illusory. And so therefore, because its source is not illusory or completely false, that thing itself, namely, let's say, matter, and all the designations that come within that matter, is not also completely illusory as impersonalists would claim. And therefore, it has some sort of substance. And therefore, all the more reason to claim it as opposed to, make abstraction of it. Claim it and use it in Krishna service, just like, I'm a Korean Christian,
Yes, Chandra, I totally agree. And not only is it much better for preaching to own our local cultures, our local communities, it's way more beautiful going to Bali or China or Thailand. And on the one hand, you're a devotee, so you fit in with the other devotees. But then on top of that, you get to experience this new local culture, which is sometimes, to be honest, a lot better. At least the food is better. That's what's happened to me in China and Bali. Oh my goodness, the prasadam here is just amazing. It's incredible.
In India here too, you get these amazing Bengali preparations that are just, wow, out of this world. At least where I'm at, I'm in Mayapur. But sometimes you miss a good old whatever, vegan cheeseburger. We're both fans of Hridaya Nanamarj. Prabhupada told Hridaya Nanamarj, eat, what you like to eat. And so there was this story, he tells the story sometimes, I heard it a couple of times. There was a GBC meeting in 1978 or 79. And, the question was asked, what would you like to eat, And And Ridanwar says, I want a peanut butter sandwich. And like, it was like this shock, kind of like, what, peanut butter sandwich, you know? But then Tamal Krishna says, you know, oh, yeah, I'll also take a peanut butter sandwich. And then, oh, yeah, I'll take one too, you know? And so the devotees were like, yeah, actually, okay, we can be American in our taste, you know? And if it's long as it's prasadam, then haribol, you know? So I think that's a funny
it's a good example.
anecdote.
And sure, yeah, it's living from the principles. That's wisdom. All the external stuff, you know, it's nice, but we just, you know, shouldn't be attached to it. One
Speaking
other
of
thing,
food, yeah, please go ahead. Well, I just thought of, you know, there's that nice anecdote. It's in the Veda base. You know, anyone who's hearing this can look it up. There's that conversation between Prabhupada and who's that famous poet, Ginsberg, Allen Ginsberg. And there's that conversation where Prabhupada, you know, Allen Ginsberg says, yeah, but you know, people, you know, to come to Krishna consciousness, you have to eat Indian food. And Prabhupada's like, what is this Indian food? You know, this Krishna says, fruit, flower, you know, a leaf, fruit, or water offered with devotion. And he stresses that. He says, you know, Krishna has thousands of Lakshmis, goddesses of fortune, cooking for him all sorts of wonderful dishes. He does not need any, or he doesn't want or doesn't need any of your material food, whether it comes from West Bengal, Orissa, Korea, Australia, France, whatever. He doesn't need it. He doesn't require it at all. But what he wants is bhakti. What he wants is devotion. So I really like that conversation where Prabhupada really stresses the universality of bhakti, you know, the universality of bhakti. And unless we start stressing that, and you know, there's not that many expressions of culture. There's dress, which is super important. There's food recipes. There's, you know, the way you do music. There's, you know, whether you sit on the floor or on pews. There's only a handful of expressions of culture. And devotees in the world had better really paying attention to those details, to those few, you know, expressions, and really tailoring them to local sensibilities, if they have a chance at all to make the Hare Krishna movement a real global phenomena and not a global phenomena for a majority Indian diaspora.
Yep. That's what must happen by definition, because that's the world we live in. The whole world isn't India. The whole world is America and China and Africa and all these other places. I'm glad you brought up 9:26, chapter 9, verse 26. This is my favorite verse in the Gita. And to me, it just really encapsulates the love, the love that Krishna has for us as the divine father figure. So I see this all the time actually, but there's one specific example. When I was in Vermont, there are these Nepali immigrants who have come to Vermont, and there was a little girl walking past the pizza shop where I was working, and she, you know, little angel with next to her grandparents, they're all innocent and whatever. But anyway, this girl, she picks up like a piece of dirt from the ground. It's like a little stone. It's nothing. And she goes, "Look, Baba, look what I give just for you." And then they go, "Oh, thank you. We really appreciate that." And you know, the parents, they know it's nothing, but because it's offered with love and devotion, they really will accept it. And that's what Krishna is doing for us. Right.
Sometimes we hear, well, you know, but Krishna, you know, Lord Chaitanya likes spinach. Now, it's true that Bhaktivinoda Thakur in some of his songs and other sources as well. Do you hear my voice okay, or is there a lot of background disturbance?
I can hear. It's okay.
Yeah? So I can move inside if you want. It's a directional mic I have. No? Okay. Ooh. So you hear, like, for example, to use this example, you hear that Lord Chaitanya liked spinach a lot. It's one of his favorite dishes. Now the question comes up is, you know, is it one of his favorite dishes because he eternally likes spinach, or is it because there's a lot of spinach in West Bengal where he happened to appear and devotees there were accustomed to cooking spinach and They offered their spinach with tons of love. I mean, the eternal associates of Krishna came from Goloka Vrindavan to accompany Lord Chaitanya in the form of whatever, Srivas Thakur or Pundarit Vidyanidhi or Mukunda or Govinda and so on, all these eternal associates, Sriva Gadadhar Pandit and so on, they obviously are going to offer, to Krishna with tons of bhakti. And so the question that comes up to us now as practitioners is like, because, you often hear this, like, no, you got to offer what Krishna likes. You got to offer, to Krishna food that Krishna likes. And it's like, you're like, okay, well, where do you find out what Krishna likes? You can find out what Krishna liked when he was here 5,000 years ago, when he was here 500 years ago. In one instance, maybe like he appreciated a particular recipe of shak, and then, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, who had the vision of that, wrote it down. Okay, but then how do you know if Lord Chaitanya wants spinach today? Maybe he wants something else today. You know what I mean? You're not there. You can't ask him. Like, Lord Chaitanya is not in front of you. Like, what would you like to eat today? What what does your transcendental tongue, like today? And furthermore, God actually, by definition, is so loving towards his parts and parcels that, like, he'll accept, if the devotee wants to offer him this out of spontaneous love, he'll totally, that'll be his favorite dish, because the devotee felt inspired to offer that to him, on the spontaneous platform. But for us who are in the platform of sadhana bhakti, of, practicing rules and regulations so that we can gradually come to higher levels of Krishna consciousness, the only thing we have to go by or go for in terms of reference is explicit statements such as your favorite verse, 926. And there, Krishna doesn't, like Prabhupada told Allen Ginsberg, he doesn't say, it's got to be, spinach, or it's just got to be offered with love, whatever it is, within the category that he describes.
Yep, it's all there in the Gita.
It's all there in the Gita.
We don't need anything else. I started reading Garuda Das's translation of the Bhagavad Gita. I'm on chapter 3 now.
I hope you like it also.
Oh my God. I mean, it doesn't matter what translation I read. There's verse by verse is a volume of wisdom that it's perfect. You really don't need anything else. You can just pick one verse and meditate on it for like a month, a year, and, best not to add too much more beyond that. Anyway, let's go back to...
You don't want to take birth again?
So back to preaching. Cognitive dissonance. This is it's no longer a problem for me, thank God, but when I talk to other people, I notice it very quickly. As soon as I start talking about things that are a little bit too off into left field, so to speak, I notice cognitive dissonance. And it's like, to me, it's just a kind of resistance that you get when you're trying to market something, preach something, teach something, etc. So what do you think about cognitive dissonance and how to handle it?
One of the youngest disciples of Prabhupada, I think he was one of who, I think he got initiation for, who was like one of the last ones, or the youngest one, either the youngest or one of the last ones, apparently the youngest. His name is, oh my God, I'm so ashamed I don't remember him. He's in Hawaii. He tried to run for president. Oh my God, I'm so sorry.
Tulsi Gabbard?
No, but no, it's a male. He's got a male body. Anyway, I remember once he was telling me, he said, like the Jimi Hendrix Experience. The band was called the Jimi Hendrix Experience because it wasn't just, you didn't just hear Jimi Hendrix, you experienced, Jimi Hendrix, whatever that meant, right? So I think there's this, Krishna consciousness really has, I believe for sure, a mystical experience component to it. And actually that mystical experience component is, I would say, above this pristine theology, above this beautiful philosophy, is our main selling point, is our if you want to use marketing terminology, it really is the best weapon, quote unquote, in our marketing arsenal is the experiential component of Krishna consciousness, which we believe is easily accessed through kirtan, through coming in contact with Krishna's holy name in a congregation, through prasadam, through that experience. I mean, I remember the first times I went to the temple in Paris, I thought I was walking into I swear to God, I thought these people are extraterrestrials. The fact that they were all dressed like freaking so far out, and not just the monks, but everybody just, certainly added to that experience. But I thought, like, my God, these people read minds. They're operating on a whole different platform of consciousness here. And oh my God, like, I gotta be careful with what I'm thinking. Because I really thought all devotees were literally omniscient. I mean, okay, I had some, that thought got a little, refined and qualified with purification and time as I studied the Gita. But I thought, oh my God, the experience was just out of this world. I mean, the first kirtan I went to, I was just like, oh my God, what did I just walk into? Like, what is this? Like, oh my God, I can't just classify this as just yet another movie I went to, or another, cafe I went to drink, or another chat with a friend. This is like in a whole different, category altogether. If I'm at all honest, I just experienced something just like that I've never experienced, and that's just phenomenally, like, night and day different from any other ordinary sense perception I've experienced in my 20 years, right? So to answer your question, I think we got to somehow be instruments to offer that experience to people. And therefore Prabhupada stressed, kirtan, like getting people to chant the holy name so they can experience Krishna's mercy through the holy name, and prasadam also, and just so, yeah, somehow get them to experience it. So it goes beyond, like what you were talking, beyond knowledge. It actually becomes realized. It becomes, as you said, like wisdom, and no one can deny personal experience. I mean, personal experience is worth billions of dollars. Like, there's nothing stronger than experiencing Krishna. And I think, Christians also talk about, like, being touched by Jesus. I felt Jesus come over me, and I felt, I mean, that same principle is there of experiencing the divine beyond just theory. So we have to be, I think, if we are pure, and this is important, and I'm definitely preaching to myself here, we have to live a pure lifestyle. We have to live a pure lifestyle so that we can be as much empowered, by God's love and by God's all attractiveness, so that when people, hang out with us, they that God, that magic, that love of God somehow oozes through us. I mean, you can't cheat that. Like, why was Prabhupada able to influence so many people? And you hear testimonies of people who saw Prabhupada, who were around Prabhupada. They were like, oh my God, when I saw him, when he looked at me in the eyes. I mean, how many times do you hear that in those Prabhupada memories? When Prabhupada looked at me in the eyes, even for like a split second, I thought he was looking at me, since billions of lifetimes. He was seeing me naked, as a soul. Like, you hear that from literally dozens and hundreds of people who saw Prabhupada just by hanging out with him. That story that Prabhupada, I forget his name again. I'm really bad with names. Prabhupada disciple lives in Vrindavan. He tells a story that when he was at an airport and Prabhupada was arriving in America somewhere, and when Prabhupada came through the door, there was this African-American janitor, maintenance man, who started screaming, look at that man, he's shining, look at that man, mystical experience just by coming in contact with someone who's an exalted soul. So, I come back to that first sentence, that statement by Kaviraj Goswami, Krishna Shakti Vinana Hetat Pravartana. You have to be empowered in order to spread the movement. So individually, if we live a pure life, then there's higher chances that Krishna will empower us to really touch people just by our association with him, and then it's not about your ability or my ability. It's about being conduits of God's unlimited love and unlimited all attractiveness, and that's multiplied or amplified all the more when someone can hang out with similarly, empowered souls chanting God's all-powerful name together. Then it's like, wow, right?
It seems like as preachers, we need to unite our energy with God or whatever it is we're preaching, and then step out of the way and
Step out of the way.
and then let that speak through us.
Yeah,
That's kind of our job, right?
Yeah. Yeah, well said. That reminds me of Harinamananda. When I was a young monk, we had like this hero called Harinamananda Prabhu, who's married, who lives in Switzerland. And at the time, in the mid-90s, he was just like this monster book distributor. I say monster because he was so empowered in Switzerland. He distributed sets of Bhagavatam daily, sets, plural. Like he broke his back basically because he would like walk around with stacks of like 20, 40 Bhagavatams, and he was able to just like and there was a culture back then of selling the books. I'm all for giving books for free. I've definitely changed, and I'm all for free book distribution. I think that's the way of the future if you're not a monk. But anyway, he was able to just, selling religious books is a lot more difficult than giving them for free. And I'm not saying we should, why should we be sadists and love to inflict extra pain on us as if that pleases God more. No, but anyway, not getting into that topic of whether we should give or sell Prabhupada's books to people. He was so empowered, and we're like, and then he mentions in that, that book, I remember that Nectar of Book Distribution, which I haven't read in like 20 years. I remember he said, I always pray to Krishna to please not to get in the way, to not get in the way.
Yes, that is definitely something worth praying for. That's a real, genuine prayer that I try to do sometimes. So I've asked you everything I've prepared to ask you about. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about?
Maybe that, there is a higher taste. Like if someone's watching this, I can testify to the parandrishtva, to the higher taste that Krishna talks about in 250, whatever, 8. There really is a higher taste that comes from sharing Krishna consciousness with others. You really get your transcendental kicks from it, I was speaking to a friend the other day, and I was like, I was telling him, I was a devotee from Brazil, and last summer he was supposed to meet me and Tulsi Prabhu on our 3-week trip in the south of France, right, where we rented apartments in Toulouse and Marseille and Saint-Tropez and Nice, and we just went out on Harinam for a few hours and then gave out free Bhagavad Gitas, which you kindly sponsored. And then the year before that, we rented one place specifically in Biarritz, this surfing spot on the Atlantic coast near the Spanish border in France. And I was remembering how fun it was. We had so much fun, and there was, there was zero sense gratification. We didn't even want to watch. Not to say that you shouldn't watch a movie once in a while, but we had we're so busy and it was so effortless, going out and just chanting and giving out free books and meeting people, and inviting them to chant with us, and doing a little bit of surfing on the side and just walking around doing a little shopping, and you felt Lord Chaitanya's presence so strongly. We just had fun. We're just literally laughing so much. And that laughter was a different type of laughter, I believe. It wasn't a laughter born just of contact of the senses with their sense objects on the mundane platform. It was the kind of laughter, I would say shadow of, but in the same category, in the same, ontological category as described in the Chaitanya literatures, where you see how Lord Chaitanya and his associates had fun. They just had so much fun spreading the Sankirtan movement, or in the act of spreading the Sankirtan movement, they laughed, they joked. It was just jovial. It was so much fun. So yeah, if you're in a rut, just always remember that if you can somehow get back to sharing Krishna consciousness with others in one way or other, it almost seems like I don't want to say it's automatic, because God's not a robot, right? It's up to him, but it almost seems surrealistically robotic, that God is almost bound to give you bliss if you spread Krishna consciousness, because he's just so happy always with such an activity,
I know what you mean by the automatic thing. I would describe it as tuning in. you're 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 literally entering into another dimension. And as soon as you just open the door and you're in there, then you're there.
Right. Yeah.
Enjoy is not the best word, but yeah, you just go there and you're there.
Yeah, I remember. I mean, I'll just tell you. I remember. These were, those years that I spent as a monk at the LA airport, because I spent all my days at the LA airport, distributing Bhagavad Gita. Those were torturous days, because man, it was hard spending hours and hours and rejection.
I heard just up to you were at the airport.
Oh, well, it was torturous many times, because so many rejections, like 90% of the day, we're just just submitting yourself to many rude people who just like really rude to you, and you're attached to, giving them a Bhagavad Gita. But at the same time, I experienced so much spiritual joy during those years. And I'll always remember there was one evening, it was like the 23rd of December, or maybe 23rd of December. And we were out at the airport till like 10 p.m. We'd been there since like 8 in the morning. We're there till 10 p.m. And those were the days when you could pass like boxes through security. So you're on the other side of security. And you had like your boxes of Bhagavad Gita's piled up against the wall, next to the shop where you buy postcards and soft drinks and stuff. And I remember I was approaching one person after another with a couple of Bhagavad Gitas in my hand. And I was just like so blissed out. I was just almost like laughing from one person to the other. And my knees were killing me. My legs were just like excruciating in pain, because I'd been standing up since 8 in the morning, couldn't feel my legs anymore. And yet I was so blissful. For me, in my limited, I'm just talking for myself. For me, it was such a blissful experience. And I remember it was a mixture of like intense enthusiasm and feeling love towards others. And at the same time, this deep, deep sense of detachment, where I didn't give a damn, excuse my language, about whether the person actually, about the outcome of that exchange with someone, whether they took the Bhagavad Gita or not. Like, contrary to most of the time when we're like, I really am attached to whether they're, attachment to the fruit, right? There I was like, by Krishna's mercy, I believe, completely detached. And I was just flying. I felt like a butterfly going from one flower to the other. And I remember at one point I stopped and I was like, oh my God, if I could keep the same consciousness that I'm experiencing right now, and have a physical body that didn't give me as much pain, or that I didn't have to, drive back to the ashram and then, shower and put to sleep and then, pull out of the mode of ignorance the next morning. If I could just stay in this crisp kind of consciousness and have a body that, that just was the same as I'm in right now for eternity, and keep doing this right here at this airport with the same kind of pristine, for me, consciousness, I would do it. They're like, I'm ready to do this for eternity, So yeah,
That's
there's a lot of nectar
story.
For us.
Yeah, nectar. That's what it's all about. And it goes back to what you were saying earlier about experience. This is how we can transcend all of this stuff I've been asking about, like resistance, cognitive dissonance, also ego I could ask you about. But we can just transcend that whole game and just work on the level of experience. When you're just experiencing the higher taste, the nectar, etc., and then you're there. So there's no worries, there's no attachments, and everything works as it should work.
Right. Where every step is a dance and every word is a song.
Yeah, that is a great way to say it.
Brahma Samhita.
Oh, cool. Okay, so I think we can call it a day. I do want to talk to you a little bit more, though, after the recording stops.
Okay.
And it looks like you have a friend coming by behind you.
I have a friend coming by?
Yeah, there's someone behind you.
Coming 1 second. A fruit vendor.
Oh, cool. So, Chandra, is there any plug you want to make where the people can
Yeah, I
find
mean,
you?
I have a YouTube channel. It's called Om Zone on YouTube. Subscribe, and thank you.
Cool. Yeah, and I'm Ethos Ananda on YouTube and all the other places. ethosananda.com, which is now banned on Facebook and Instagram. I don't know why.
Really? Wow.
Yes, very suspicious stuff happening there. But anyway, I take it as a badge of honor. I'm speaking the truth, I guess.
Let me switch over to my phone. If you want, we can hang up, and then I'll switch to my phone so I can speak to the fruit vendor at the same time who's waiting for me.
Okay, sounds good. So thank you, Chandra. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, everybody. Hare Krishna.
See you later.
Okay, all the best. Thank you very much.
All the best. Cheers.